What a pleasure it is to be here amongst many colleagues and friends. And thank you for the opportunity to open this important meeting, this festival. And festival requires a recognition of celebration and indeed implies it. And I think that's a very appropriate context to start the meeting and recognise the 5th anniversary of the London Declaration. However, any celebration requires to be tempered by a reality check. The NTD brand as we know it really began in April 2005 at meetings which were convened by GTZ and WHO in Berlin. Next, please, Marion. Can I go forward? This is a summary of that meeting when WHO first used the term neglected tropical diseases. And at Berlin Airport, the day after that meeting, on the 20th of April, the then ADG, Dr. Asamoah Ba, said, "Tomorrow I will create the Department for Neglected Tropical Diseases in WHO." However, it's important, despite that happening 12 years ago, to recognise the term Great Neglected Diseases was used by Ken Warren, who was the head of the Rockefeller Health Department during the 1970s and 80s. And Ken Warren was a visionary whose vision was to harness the power of molecular biology, biochemistry and immunology at the time and bring in the real leaders in those fields to address what we now know as neglected tropical diseases, with the aspiration of developing new drugs or vaccines and diagnostics. Ken Warren, despite the fact he was a field worker and had worked in the field on schisto, actually didn't really apply the Rockefeller funding to what we call the NTDs. He was very much research-based. And despite the fact that at that time, programs such as the onchocerciasis program in West Africa, prior to ivermectin, using vector control, and in the Americas, triatomine control of domestic vectors of Chagas disease was ongoing and being very successful. In parallel with that, TDR had emerged and developed two of the really important strategies, MDT, multi-drug therapy for leprosy, and then the formative work on ivermectin and dual therapy for lymphatic filariasis during that time. But I want to address what brands are. And 5 years ago, at the time of the London Declaration, I used Julie Jacobson's request or produced an op-ed or an editorial in Parasites and Vectors about neglected tropical diseases and thought a bit about what the NTD brand actually meant. Now, I want to address brands and branding. The really important thing is on this slide, you will see brands which you instantly recognize. So what is a brand and what is branding? Well, it's a strategic point of view, not a set of activities. And it's central to creating customer value. It's a tool for creating and maintaining selective advantage. And brands really are cultures which circulate in society as stories. But if you go into the management science literature about brands, and the next slide is taken from a Harvard Business School review, there are 4 components to brand value. There's reputational value, there's experiential value, there's relationship value around the partnerships and the customer interests, and there's a symbolic value. Now, I want to dwell on the concept of a brand, and you can think of these brands on their everyday lives. There are brands, famous brands. Perhaps the Coca-Cola has been the embellishment of the brand. There's emblems of cars, there's clothing brands, there's digital brands, Facebook, Google, Twitter, etc. But one thing about brands is their association with quality and a fierce recognition by the owners of the brand that there's a determination to protect the brand name and take all measures to protect it, usually legal measures, against the competition and the repute. But the real danger for brands is the tainting of the brand name, and just a couple of examples of that: the Volkswagen emissions scandal, which tainted the Volkswagen brand, and more recently, the Samsung Galaxy 7 problems where phones were exploding on aeroplanes. One of the really interesting things about brands in the context of NTDs is brands tend to have ambassadors. And just the best examples of ambassadors of a brand in the NTD context is Jimmy Carter and his passion for guinea worm. While Jimmy Carter himself was the overall representative of the brand, representing quality, success, downstream at the country level, Yakubu Gowon, the ex-president of Nigeria and one of the most successful presidents of Nigeria, typified the Carter qualities within the country to achieve a remarkable public health success in certifying Nigeria free of guinea worm. Now, I want to focus now on the headline issues about the NTD brand. The great success of the NTD brand now is that it's incorporated into the Sustainable Development Goals, and that is a remarkable achievement for the community over the last decade or so, achieved through advocacy, communication, commitment, and belief. And we know what the evidence is. I've no need to tell this audience the evidence is strong enough to include inclusion of the NTDs within the Sustainable Development Goal agenda. So we now, as a brand, are far more effective and well recognized than becoming the other diseases of the Millennium Development Goals, which is a somewhat derogatory expression for NTDs, in my judgment. But I think we should also look to the fact that we could be envisioned as a successful company, exemplified by proven success, commitment, quality human resources, and adaptable to changing conditions, and respected, particularly within the global health community, by the other health players. Now, whilst we can't be recognized as a commercial market, we must seek to improve provision to our customers. So within the brand of NTDs, I suggest we have a collective responsibility as employees of the NTD brand. So as employees, we have a corporate responsibility to deliver our existing products, to deliver on the solution of the technical problems which face us, and to deliver, if we can, new products in a timely way, advocating for the benefits and value of these programs, but being adaptable to changing information. So whilst health is central to our focus, there is a significant overlap with virtually all the Sustainable Development Goals: education, hunger, water, sanitation, environment and climate change, healthy cities, gender equality, human rights issues, and partnership. They're all aspects of the development agenda. Now, I believe also there is an issue of advocacy, and the Lancet, following a meeting a couple of years ago, was persuaded to use the word chronic pandemic for NTDs, endorsed by Richard Horton and carried on in a recent review article we wrote. But I believe we have a situation where I would describe it as having a brand dichotomy now. NTDs being embedded in the Sustainable Development Goals clearly have an issue in relation to being part of the overall poverty alleviation agenda, whilst on the other hand, We have the disease-specific targets within the WHO roadmap articulated very effectively by the Uniting to Combat NTDs scorecard, measuring progress. So I believe we have the dichotomy of the NTD brand, the development agenda linked to all the relevant issues within the Sustainable Development Goals, but the disease-specific agenda articulated by the WHO roadmap. So therefore, we have to look at what the brand messages might be downstream and what the challenges are. And I thought about the roadmap in terms of, okay, a roadmap, you pick up an atlas or you look on Google, what do you see? Well, you may see a straight motorway with no barriers ahead. You may see a very complex set of roads within an environment we might in UK call Spaghetti Junction. Or you may see a country road. And you may see very difficult roads where there are blockages. Or you may come to environments, actually, where there are no roads. And the bottom right is a river in Venezuela where people are trying to deliver ivermectin to Yanomami communities where there are no roads at all, so road maps actually don't work, and where you have serious challenges if you're trying to confirm elimination. So, what should be the NTD brand message downstream, given these potential dichotomies? Well, first of all, I believe we should embed the NTDs within universal health coverage issues. As Margaret Chan says, the ultimate expression of fairness. We must emphasize that NTDs are a prerequisite to poverty alleviation. And there's this interdependence between water, sanitation, education, etc. We know there are value for money interventions, but we also have really effective partnerships operating within the NTD brand. Each of those partnerships naturally has their own brand, be it Filariasis Alliance, the Schistosomiasis Alliance, the Trypanosomiasis Alliances. But I think we should also remember the key question which faces us now in relation to poverty alleviation, and I take this from Bernard Lisa's work, and it's not changed since 2010, that only 0.6% of official development assistance for health is spent on NTDs, and I believe that is a gross inequity which needs to be addressed given the successes we've had. I also think of the challenges. I think we must not forget Aedes aegypti. It is very obvious that it transmits Zika. Aedes aegypti is a highly effective, very adaptable, expanding vector, as is its sibling Aedes albopictus. Remember, and this is a book by Sir Richard Christophers published in 1960, it's that thick about the biology of Aedes aegypti. I think you're going to need this as a textbook in the next years. Dengue we know about, massive problem, underestimated, chikungunya emerging, and don't let's forget that yellow fever epidemics are still occurring in Africa. We have potential technical solutions which are going to move the agenda forward, be it fexnidazole for sleeping sickness, Tylomac or IDA, triple therapy for lymphatic filariasis or onco. But we are faced with a changing epidemiology caused by high complexity and issues around conflict, politics, and so on. And I just put up a few images of what has happened since NTD brand was launched. The financial crisis, the Ebola outbreak, the Arab Spring, earthquakes in Haiti, the emergence of Boko Haram in northeast Nigeria, and now ISIS. These are really big challenges, and in addition to that, not surprisingly, we are now faced by famine on a massive scale in countries like Yemen, Somalia, South Sudan, and northeast Nigeria. We also have another issue, and that is a new nationalism. The politics that we are faced with post-Brexit and post the election in America have changed the environment. America first means only one thing, that the rest of us are second, if not lower, and the bottom billion will probably sink further into the abyss, which we are seeking to extract them from. So what of the crystal ball in relation to our brand? We have a new DG in WHO. Will he or she maintain the commitment to NTDs at the highest level? Will bilateral funding be retained through the generosity of the US and the UK administrations? Can we expect new bilateral donors from Europe to enter the NTD space, given the political uncertainties in France, Germany, the Netherlands, all countries which have supported to one extent or another global health, aside from the issue and confusion of Brexit? Will the endemic countries, many of whom have enjoyed sustained economic growth, countries like Ghana, Mozambique, Nigeria, Ethiopia, commit those increased resources to health? And if so, NTDs, question mark, will they? And how will policymakers decide on priorities in global health in relation to the emergence of the non-communicable diseases? We have competition within the global health policy sphere. It is not helped by what I believe strongly are completely flawed figures of the global burden of disease for NTDs. The figure of 150,000 deaths per year is a gross underestimate of the mortality. So how can we pursue these agendas as employees of the NTD brand? It's well established, and we have the continued responsibility to promote it. It's integral to the development agenda, but we are in an age of even greater uncertainty than we were. So we need a resilience and adaptability. Like any company, we cannot afford to be static. As purveyors of the brand, NTDs, we have to be responsible for responding to change and seize opportunities and market our product. Articulate the arguments for investment in control or elimination of these diseases as the best buy for the poorest to escape what I think is appropriately called a global pandemic. So I conclude, whether success or failure, we need to move forward. The momentum is what is critical. Now, thank you for the opportunity, Cameron.